Alright guys, today we've got this running Ecotec 1.4 liter turbo engine, and it's sitting inside of a 2015 Chevrolet Sonic. But what I'm going to show you today and what we're going to be working on applies to any vehicle with the same engine, whether it be the Cruze, the Trax, or the Buick Encore. So what we've got is a coolant leak. If we light it up down here, you can see right in the back side of the transmission there's a couple of puddles of coolant, and then there's a really big one right here. We come in from there, and if we try to see where that's coming from, what we can see is the top of the temperature sender that's at the end of this harness is wet. And if we take a mirror, shine underneath, this one's harder to get in the camera, so I'll do my best here. We can also see the bottom of this sensor is wet as well. Right? You can see just a little bit of coolant in that view right there. So this might be a problem with a sensor seal, but we recently replaced the upper radiator hose on this car, and we know that this is a part that's prone for failing, this water outlet, and it's an aftermarket part to begin with. And if we replace it with a new GM water outlet, we'll get a new sensor and a new seal with it. And it's not that expensive just to go the extra mile. So what we're going to be doing today is letting this cool off and changing out that water outlet. All right, guys, this is not a really difficult repair. What we're going to have to do is remove these three hose connections. We've got an electrical connection here. We have an air hose line here that we're going to want to get out of the way, and then there's another coolant hose connection down here that you can see back in the back there. This guy right here. And then we've got this sensor connection. Now, it's probably not as cool as I would like it to be, but we got to get this car back on the road for tomorrow, so we're going to go ahead and get started. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this sensor connection. You can see looking straight down here, there's a little connector that you push in, right? You push this in, it allows you to do a release. I'm going to have to set the flashlight down to actually remove it. That's all it is, right? You just give this guy a push and he releases. And this is actually one of the places that we were seeing the coolant. You can see all the coolant on top of this, right? So it's all wet. So somewhere around that sensor, we have at least one leak. I'm sure we probably have more than that. To get this guy off that goes to the oxygen sensor, there's a couple of ways you can do it. On the very back side, on the side that's closest to the engine, there's a couple of one of these connectors with little wings. If you zoom in here, right where my finger is, and you can get in there and squeeze them. It's a really hard view for the camera. But most of the time, you can skip that step. A lot of people don't realize they're held on like that, and they break this off. But you can really get this guy out just by wiggling that connector off. So on a Sonic, it's going to be shake it front to back, and you'll be able to slide the connector off the bracket. On a Cruze type, up and down, I don't recall the Encore and the Trax, but there'll be one of the two, right? So now we've already got both of our electrical connections out of the way. Now, I'm not going to go do the drain of the coolant in the standard way for this job. Some of these models will have a petcock on the radiator, some won't. I've got a catch pan underneath. We're going to get most of it that way. What we're going to end up doing is we're just going to start taking these hoses off, and we're going to let it drain out that way. And catch it in the catch pan below. The important thing is just to make sure that you have some way to get the coolant. And we're just going to start working our way top to bottom here. Going to pop on a tool to remove these GM spring clamps. It's basically just something like this that you compress. Work that one off. And then we're going to use the larger side to get the inlet hose here. Suction under that one. Actually, you know what? I'm going to use the smaller side to make sure I can compress it all the way. Now this we just changed in an earlier video because we had a problem with this hose leaking. We changed that out. We got rid of that problem, and we saw we still had another leak with this water outlet. So this hose is probably going to come off real easy because we just replaced it not even 2 days, maybe, yeah, 2 days ago. So we're just going to work this guy off nice and slow because we want to make sure our pan's in the right direction. That's the only reason we're being gentle here. Just make sure we're catching all this before we let it out in any big way. Slide it over a little bit. Great. It's all going in the pan. You can see the pan right down here. That's the green that you see below. So she's all going in the pan. We're going to let that drain out. While that's going, we're going to go ahead and work on this one above it. Now for that one, what I'm going to do, there's a different kind of tools you can do for these small hoses. I like to use these plastic or nylon jawed type pliers to work it loose. Just to get rid of the adhesion. And then just like the other one, just work it off. There might be some coolant in here too, but likely not. All right. So that's 2. Now the next guy here, there's like a little clip that holds this upper hose that goes to the reservoir. And he just kind of slides off like this, right? So you just have to grab it on both sides. And a trick with this is he won't come off if you don't get him uniformly. It's one of those kind of interesting engineering marvels, right? He'll hold on really tight if you try to take him off on just one side. And now we'll be able to take this hose off. All right, so we've got all the hoses off on this side. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go grab a socket, and we're going to release the tension on this spring clamp here, or this worm clamp, so that we can pull this air hose off and out of the way. All right, guys, this will be a 7mm socket to get on this clamp. It's pretty tight. So we just want to loosen it up so we can see it's moving, and then we can remove this air line. Now this guy we want to kind of get up and out of the way so we can pull this part out when the time comes. So we're going to kind of shift him over like this. And we're going to stuff a rag in here just to keep any debris or crud or critters from getting in there. All right, now we've got one more hose clamp to release. Come in here with our tool again. Let's see if you guys can even see that with the light. And then we should have some more coolant come out of here. And we just want to be careful with these because it's still kind of hot. Just want to control where it goes. We want this to all run down the back side of the transmission. Just like that. We can kick our pan right into position just in time. Maybe lost just a little bit. All right, so we'll let that run out. And next thing we're going to go after here is we've got several of these external Torx bolts. I see 1, 2, 3, at least 3. We're going to go get a socket and a ratchet. We're going to pull those and we're ready to remove this part. All right, guys, we're going to go with a E10 socket. I don't know how much that's going to come out with all the glare from these lights, but it's an E10 for these bolts. There's one here, one here, and one here. This is a real straightforward repair. As you can see, we're about to remove the part right now. Just going to try to get these all the way removed by hand here. I believe these bolts stay captive to the part, but we want to get them fully extended. Got some coolant on my fingers, so it's on my gloves rather, so it's acting like a lubricant. So slipping a little bit here. Un momento, por favor. All right, so I think that one's out all the way. Yep, and then we got this guy here. All right. He feels like he's all the way loose too now. Now the only thing holding this part on is the adhesion of the gasket. So we're just going to wiggle it. You see, we have these bolts not quite out all the way. Our part has let go though. You might have a little bit more coolant come out when we get this guy all the way. Let me just get this third bolt here. It's just got maybe 3 or 4 threads still holding on to the engine block. There we go. All right, so there's our failed part. Now, there's a gasket that goes in here, and we can see that that did not come out with our part. So we're going to go down and get that so we don't forget. All right, so make sure you take that off. And then let's take a look at our replacement. So as we inspect the old part, we can still see the wetness around the sensor. And in fact, one of the things I'll show you here, just give me a second. I grab a quick tool here. If for some reason that you had this same problem and you just wanted to replace this sensor, in order to replace this sensor, there's this metal retaining pin that you can remove with a screwdriver like that. And then you'll be able to pull this sensor out. And inside there is an O-ring. And that was what I was suspecting we were dealing with this leak. But that is not correct. It turns out what's more likely here is if we look up here, we earlier changed out the inlet hose, the upper radiator hose. And the hose was leaking, but it was a combination leak, and it turns out this is where it was cracked, right here. We just couldn't see it without getting the part out. And you guys can see there's a little hairline crack that's running along the top of this piece. You can see it on the inside too, which is how you can confirm that that's what it is. Hopefully you guys can see that in there. And then what was happening is with our new hose, it was covering this up, and it was very slowly running down the back of this guy and onto this sensor. Right? So it's still good to swap this out. You can tell by this symbol here, this is an aftermarket Dorman part, so it's good to get this Chinesium junk out of here anyway. We're going to replace that with a genuine GM part made in Germany, 25193922. be the part we're going with, or an AC Delco 15-11105. Take German engineering over Chinese engineering any day. All right, so we can see the part looks identical cosmetically. There's our sensor, there's our 3 E10s, and there's our 4 connections. There's our new gasket. One thing we're going to need to transfer over from the old one, though, is that clip for the O2 harness. So let's do that here real quick. Whoops. Set this guy right there. Going to grab a pair of pliers for that job. Right, so we're talking about this guy here. So we were saying before, you could slide the grooves out, or you could come in the back here and squeeze these wings in. She popped out on the floor for me, right? And so what we'll do is we'll slide this in to our new piece, and then we can slide our O2 sensor back on. All right, all we have left to do is clean up the mating surface and then put this guy back on and torque him down. All right, folks, we've gotten this all cleaned up, and we've dried it off. And you want to kind of move quickly, because as you dry it, it continues to seep out inside here. And one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to reach my finger in here and get a little bit of coolant. I'm just going to put a little bit of coolant on the gasket. Just want to have it be somewhat lubricated before we put it on, but otherwise we want everything dried off. Right, we'll bring this guy down into position. Get all this wiring stuff out of the way. And then we're going to start these by hand because we're going into aluminum. It's 2. Just trying to do this last one here. Just make sure you don't get it cross-threaded. If it feels like it's not going in easy, just pull it out and start it over again so you can do it easy by finger. And then we're going to run that down and torque it to 71 inch-pounds. We started this particular repair a little late, so we're losing the light, but we're just about done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to snug these up first, and then I'll come back around and torque them, just so that we make sure that we're seating this plastic part evenly before we put any pressure on it. Kind of lost the gloves here so I can get some more grip on these fasteners to hand tighten them. Plus we don't have to worry about getting any coolant on ourselves anymore. All right. Again, that's 71 inch-pounds. So this one feels snug. Right, so he's snug. He's snug. He's not snug, so we'll snug him up, and then we'll start with the torque on this one here. And then as soon as we get this guy torqued down, it's just a matter of reconnecting everything, guys. And then refilling with coolant and rechecking for leaks. Yeah, I didn't have this one snug down enough at all. All right, there he goes. All right, so now click. 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 All right. And now we're just going to reverse everything. So we'll put this hose back on. Put this hose back on. This one we want to get right to that little stop that's molded into the plastic. Put this one back on. And again, there's a little stop in the plastic right there. Now this one we're going to have to move the hose clamp a little bit more. He's tweaked up in the way here. And then we'll put this sensor connector back in. Make sure that clicks into place. And then we'll take this guy and we'll slide him back on to the retainer that we pushed in to the bracket. And then we got this guy left to do, but we want to get these hose clamps in first. So let's get our hose clamps. Whoops, and we got one more up here. We got this guy right here that we're going to push back in like that. And then we're going to take our little retainer. Actually push him down and snap that back in. All right, let me get our hose clamp pliers and we'll finish up. All right, guys, I repositioned this so that we could get it right up against the little nub I was telling you about. Now let's get all these spring clamps back in their home. I know there's not much you can see on this one. I'm going to have to, block your view to get it where it needs to go. And in fact, I'm going to have to probably get in here and reposition it because the flashlight is in my way. We can go ahead and grab this one up on front here now. General rule of thumb I have on these is if I replace the hose, then I replace the clamps. But if I reuse the hose, then I leave the original clamps in place. It's just kind of like a good rule of thumb. All right, we got this big inlet hose here. Again, I apologize, guys. We're losing the light rapidly here. Like a storm coming on top of everything else. But we're just putting clamps on. It's not rocket science. All right. Might position him a little bit better in a moment, get him directly centered. But next thing we're going to do is I'm going to go get our socket. We're going to put this air hose back on. All right, folks, we got everything back on the original witness marks where we want it. All three of these and the one down here as well. Now we're going to take this air outlet hose, work him back on. Make sure you took your paper out if you had it. And we're just going to hand tighten this for now. Look up the torque value in a moment. We're basically done with this repair. We're going to top off our coolant next. And we're going to wash off all this old coolant. So let's top off the coolant off camera and we'll come back for the final piece. All right, guys, one of the last things we're going to do here is we just got a gallon of tap water. We've gotten our catch pan out of the way. And what we're going to do is we're going to flush all this coolant out of all these recesses so that we're just dealing with fresh water. That way we can tell if we have any new leaks when we take it for the test drive. And we also will be able to dilute any spillage that we may have missed on the driveway so that we don't have any wildlife implications. The problem with this coolant is it's poisonous to wildlife, right? And so animals, not just cats and dogs, but any animals are going to want to lick it up. And so you want to make sure you have a catch pan. You want to make sure you catch as much as you can, and whatever you don't want to catch, you want to dilute a lot, like we just did here. All right, I don't see any more coolant pools. I see nice, clean water pools. Final check, clip, spring clamp, spring clamp, spring clamp, connection, sensor connection, spring clamp, worm clamp. We've topped off our reservoir. And by the way, on the front here, if we come around here, you see these arrows that are molded in, right? Here and here. What they're telling you here is to bring this coolant up to this level, right? And so we had it to that level right before we started filming, and she's already drank it down to here. So we're going to keep topping it back off to this seam, which is where these arrows point, until she quits drinking with it just sitting here without the engine running. We're going to run the engine, drink it some more until it'll stay like that, and then we'll take it on the highway. We'll probably have to top it off 1 or 2 more times as well after that, and that should be it. We'll come back and show the final thing after we've steamed all this water off and we can prove we don't have any more leaks. All right, we've had a couple of days of highway driving, folks. We're not losing anything out of our reservoir. We've got no leaks anywhere, so this repair is good. A couple of things I'll point out, right? So this part, like I said at the beginning, is used on every Ecotec 1.4 liter turbo. The things that plug into it may go different places, whether you got a Cruze or a Trax or a Sonic like this or a Buick Encore. They're all going to have different directions, but this part that we changed is the same on all of them. This particular connector will go in different orientations, but everything else is all the same. The only problem we had back here in the very, very back with our heater hose that comes in right here, we had to move our clamp up a little higher because we had a little bit of a drip coming from the hose. And I don't know if it's just that the hose is bad or weak, or the clamp is just not holding on as tight anymore. We've had it for a couple of days, like I said. Let's find that position. We might replace it anyway to fix that. I think what the problem here is this is the third one of these this vehicle has had, right? It had the original. At some point somebody put a dormant on. Now at some point we're putting this on. 2015, about 7 years. It looks like these parts last 2.5 years at most. So, taking these hoses on and off eventually weakens them, and I think we'll end up having to do at some point is replace that hose. But we're done. If you got questions or comments, leave them below and I'll try to help. If you found this video useful or it saved you some money, take a moment to hit that like button. I'd really appreciate it. And as always, thanks for watching.